Good morning, and thank you for joining the webinar. I think first and foremost, allow me to introduce myself. I may have met some people who are on the webinar before today, but many of you I won't have met. My name is Conor Kavanagh. I'm Consulting Director with Genesis, and I was one of the lead consultants on the strategic work and on the research that underpinned the strategic work. So what I'm going to be doing this morning is bringing you through the key information as it relates to the work that has been completed, that has ultimately resulted in the development of the future strategy for the ROI market. I'm going to be talking about some of the background to it, critically some of the key information in terms of the segmentation, and the overall strategy that is to be implemented, and some of the measurements that's been put in place. I think really importantly as well, later on in the session, it'll be brought to life even further. So Kate Taylor will be talking to you about really how to start to implement. The strategy is one thing, but it's great on paper, but until you act upon it, it isn't really of any value. So that will come later as well, really importantly, because I think the very strong intent is to allow us to really embrace the strategy, start to implement now really for impact. So I think the first thing to say is just give you a sense of what we're going to be covering in the webinar. And what we'll really be covering is some of the key facts and figures with respect to the ROI market itself. Now, because of the pandemic, we're going to have to go back in time somewhat, because obviously there's been a major speed bump in terms of business, in terms of normality. But we do have some key facts and figures and statistics about the ROI market that put it in context, and hopefully then really start to give a strong sense about how important it is, but also how it's of very, very high potential and high value to the NI market. We'll then be talking about, some of the key factors that we see that really have probably shaped the past, but also will critically shape the future. So more broadly, what are some key macro factors, key brand factors, key consumer factors, to really give some background and context as we think about the future. Then we're going to talk about what that future looks like in terms of what we want to achieve. What is the overall scale of ambition? What's the target that we're setting ourselves, and ultimately what are we trying to achieve? Then as a key part, and hopefully I think most people will be very interested in, is as part of the work we've rightly, I think, really taken a refreshed look at the consumer and the segments that we want to pursue. So I think some people will be familiar with the existing segmentation strategy, others maybe less so, but we will be bringing you through the overall segmentation strategy and critically the segments that we want to prioritize and focus on the most. Then we'll be looking at what is the strategy. So if we know what our target is, if we know the consumers we're pursuing, what are we actually going to do to drive growth? So we'll give you an overview of that in terms of key elements and the key component parts associated with that. And then we're looking at measurements of success. So what key measures are we going to put in place to really take stock and understand, are we succeeding? Are we moving forward? Are we getting the impacts that we want? And it's not all about the top line number. Of course, the top line number will be important. That's a key metric, but there are other key metrics as well that we're going to put in place and monitor over time to evaluate impact of the strategy. From that point, I'll be finishing up, and I'll be handing over to Kate, who will be talking about from strategy to action, and hopefully give you some practical heads up advice, perspectives, insights with respect to how you can act upon the strategy. And I think that's all around about, who are we targeting, and then what are we going to do in order to influence them is the big theme there. But Kate will talk you through that, and then there'll be a question session towards the end of the webinar. Okay, so I think the first thing to touch on is, I think you'll all be aware of it, but let's put it in context, the overall importance of the ROI market. And let's look at some key facts and figures. I think the really first important thing to say is that prior to the pandemic, it was a market of huge growth, huge volume and huge value increase. Very, very significant growth over the period of the last strategy from 2016 to 2019. So I think what's really important here is for us to say to ourselves is that through the last strategy of the aim of the ROI market, there was a real strong intent in terms of what we're going to do, who we're going to target, the impact that we're going to have. And I think the critical thing is that the actions taken really had a very significant impact, with a 66% volume uplift over 2016 to 2019. So Northern Ireland as a destination is of appeal. It had latent potential, and it really leveraged some of that latent potential through the last strategy. And I think probably even more importantly in some ways is that there was a even better correlation in terms of revenue growth. So we can really get more people more overnight trips, but actually is it bringing revenue and real money into the economy, into the community business, into communities across Northern Ireland? And the answer is, undoubtedly yes. So over the same period of 16 to 19, 103% growth in revenue. So very, very, very significant growth. As a consequence of all of that, the overall share of external visitors, who take all external visitors, including NI residents themselves, that's at 25%. So 1 in 4 of the visitors as per 2019. And we can't really predict exactly what will happen in the future, but we have to assume there'll be some normalization. So those figures may hold stable as the sector itself reaches some sense of normality. And that's a great growth, up from 17.5% in 2016. So it becomes a more and more important source market. The actions we've taken have impacted on it, and therefore it is delivering more. But as a base of our overall total external visitors, ROI has become more important and larger. And again, there's very positive numbers in terms of revenue. So again, when you think about it, even though potentially ROI visitors, because of their proximity, may have shorter stays relative to international visitors, the spend ratio is very good. So it's at 19% of overall internal spend, and that's up from 11%. So I think the message here is a very important market that we have succeeded in historically. And that's really paid a dividend, not only in terms of the number of people coming, but also the share of wallet, the actual amount of value that's being generated from the market. So there are key facts and figures. I think everybody knew it's an important market, but this is just wanted to put it in some perspective. Now, the thing we need to think about next is, obviously, it's a really important market. It'll continue to be important into the future. So we need to think about the future and understand what are those key factors that we need to be paying attention to with respect to the RO market before we deep into some more detail around about the specific consumers and specific segments that we might target. So the first thing to say is that let's have a look at the macroeconomic factors. Okay, so coming out of the pandemic, the data would tell us that consumer confidence is on the increase. And so it hasn't necessarily been overly damaged. Of course, everyone's had to endure a difficult time over the pandemic. Consumer confidence in the RO market is heading in the right direction. That's also supported by increased household savings. So again, because of various lockdowns, etc., there's a very significant amount of disposable income that has not been spent, and there are savings, significant savings within the market. And again, how these are spent, we'll have to look at. But on some levels, we would really hope that we can tap into these household savings that have accrued and really leverage them in terms of consideration and choice of Northern Ireland as a holiday or short break destination. Strong economic recovery is actually predicted. It's already seen through the back end of 2021. It was predicted and forecasted into 2022. So that's a very important thing to note. The other thing is that although it is difficult to forecast in terms of the overall impact on tourism, it is actually for Northern Ireland predicted that 2022 will see growth even ahead of what was delivered in 2019, which is a record year. Now that is obviously based on conditions in terms of the pandemic and public health, but if the conditions are right, growth is actually predicted. And it's seen to be the only sole market that will deliver growth, because it'll obviously take some time for the international visitors to come back and go back to previous levels if possible. So again, that's an EY forecast. So again, assuming conditions are right, we can expect growth. Some of the other things to pay attention to are looking at the population growth. So out to 2025 and beyond, we're looking at not insignificant population growth within the RO market, which increases a broader consumer base. But I think it's worth noting that a lot of that growth will be centred in the Greater Dublin area. So again, in terms of how we're seeking to drive growth out of the RO market and where we focus our efforts, it's not to say it's all about Dublin or the province of Leinster, but that is a very significant cohort of where the growth will come from. Other things to pay attention to, again, it's hard to predict, but the exchange rate, of course, if we could predict it precisely, we'd probably do something else for a living and make money through currency trading. But there is a sense that there may be a further attrition in terms of the sterling rate versus euro. Not massive, but some may come. And if it does, that'll only serve to enhance overall competitiveness, because there'll be greater value for money for the euro within the NI market. So that looks as well. The other caveat that I'm sure we're all very familiar with is that we can't predict and we don't fully know the full impacts of Brexit. It's not fully yet known, but there may be some safe assumption that at least at some levels that some of the impacts, at least perceptually, might be more negative than positive. And therefore we need to pay attention to that and deal with that. And on one level, while the ROI market may offer lots and lots of opportunity, I think the overall sense is that really we'll have to continue to work hard, be very focused in order to try and drive growth with consumers and really continue along the very strong trajectory that was in place prior to the pandemic. Other factors need to pay attention to is overall brand factors. So some very positive news in here when we look back in time and when we think about the future. So I think the first thing to say is that over the years, particularly through 16 through 2019, the brand in terms of as a destination brand was growing momentum and had increased traction, and really that's borne out by the numbers. But also we can see positively that that's by design as well in terms of level of investment. So quite a significant investment increase, 36% from 2017 to 2019. And we know from measurement that the communications that were put in place in the market really landed well. So that drove it. We also know that the Embrace a Giant Spirit experience brand is actually gaining traction within ROI. So it's early days in terms of building understanding, building awareness, building knowledge, and building relevance. But it is starting to have traction, and it appears on early information and consumer research that it is driving overall interest. And there's a journey to go there, but it does seem to be a very positive vector and platform in which we can position Northern Ireland as a destination brand within the ROI market. However, that said, there still is a significant issue around about the level of knowledge that people have with respect to Northern Ireland and its offering as a short break or holiday destination. So, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but the job is nowhere near done in terms of building an understanding, a knowledge base and relevance of Northern Ireland as a destination. There's still lots of deficits in terms of the ROI consumers' knowledge. But we can see that as glass being half full or half empty. It's certainly an opportunity to give more news, to give more information, to drive more interest. And the other thing is just to bear in mind that there are going to be potentially further sporadic negative news stories with respect to Northern Ireland, and that may impact the overall brand. I think the thing is that we've got to have checks and balances within this and really have new news around about Northern Ireland as a holiday destination that really is at front of mind. So when there is the little blips in terms of some negative stories, it is very much counterbalanced with the positive. So again, in terms of the overall message, in terms of building the destination brand, it's on a very strong and positive trajectory, and that's borne out by the numbers and borne out by the impact of the communications. And the other things to pay attention to is the overall competitive factors. So some good news in here as well. But we do, you do operate within a competitive context, and probably the biggest competitor of all is the ROI market itself. The really positive news is here from the last time that the strategy was done and the measurements around about the overall profile of Northern Ireland as a destination brand is around the things that matter most to consumers and influence them the most. Actually, Northern Ireland performed as strongly as ROI, and that wasn't always historically the case. So it really does deliver on the things that matter most, in line, ball, and parity with ROI. So that's a big step and big progress over a number of years, and it really offers a high base of confidence in terms of our ability to compete in our own right, but also as a destination relative to ROI itself. The other thing is this to be borne out here as well is that if you look at the data in terms of customer satisfaction and meeting expectations, it's very, very high. So the most recent data will tell us that 57% of ROI consumers, when they visited Northern Ireland, said it met their expectations, and 40% said it exceeded their expectations. So it only leaves a very small 3% where it didn't deliver on what they had hoped. So that's a very, very good base. And in a world of social media, kind of word of mouth, advocacy, that's a very strong metric to be working with. But I guess the question is, how do we continue to delight, and how do we move that 40% up even further into exceeding expectations? The one little thing to bear in mind is, and again, this will maybe ebb and flow over time, is that historically in 2016, one of the major bases for competitive advantage was value for money in terms of at least perceived value for money. And that's not as strong as it used to be. That is really clear, is really important to say, is that does not say that Northern Ireland has poor value for money or weak value for money. It's actually seen as pretty good, but its relative strength to ROI as a destination has reduced. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. So again, in all markets for all consumers, that sense of being competitive and not necessarily being cheap, but actually really delivering for money and delivering real value is always going to be important. And again, for the ROI consumer, the ROI market is going to be very important. The other thing to say is that market share has increased really positively. So overnight trips moved from 2016 to 2019 from 4.6 to 6.1. So again, our overall share of the island of Ireland per se market has increased, and the expenditure of the overall share of island of Ireland, if you take as a universe, has really increased from 4.5% to 7.1%. So that's very good, very significant increase. But I'll ask you to hold that 7.1% figure in your mind for now, because that is going to be a key, I guess, foundation for future growth and what the future target might be. Okay. And in terms of consumer factors, I mean, the first thing to say is that our understanding is that the segmentation strategy that was established in 2016 did serve as a strong focal point and focus for communications for the industry itself, in terms of activation, in terms of targeting the consumer. So having a very clear and vivid picture of the ROI market, the consumers that we want the most, has enabled decisive action that hopefully has really resulted in positive results up to 2019. And we hope and assume that we can galvanize performance into the future. However, if we step away from that one moment, it's just also worth bearing in mind that there are still three broad cohorts of consumers that need to be addressed. And I talked about this only a minute ago around about the knowledge levels. There still is a significant pocket of consumers who have little or no knowledge or limited experience of Northern Ireland. So there's a real need to drive basic fundamental knowledge and relevance within there. There also is a cohort that are building their knowledge, learning more, understanding more. And the job we've done there is to drive not just consideration and understanding, but conversion. So what's going to get them over the line? And then there's a cohort who have knowledge and indeed experience in Northern Ireland. And more often than not, they're very favourable about Northern Ireland as a destination. And the job we've done there is to drive repeat visitation and advocacy. So they recommend Northern Ireland as a destination to their friends, colleagues, and peers. So these are kind of three areas. And it's not that we can just choose to do one or the other. Actually, within the life cycle of the consumer, we have to address all of them. We have to be saying, how do we get that latent pool of people who have little or no knowledge to know more, to start to be relevant, to drive the overall funnel in terms of visitors? How do we get those who know, have some information or building knowledge to get them to know more, to take a trip? And how do we get those who have been here to come back and also to advocate? So again, they're broad strokes, some of the things around the key consumer factors and some of the jobs that need to be done around about influencing those consumers. So there's some of the key background pieces. I think the next thing is to really look at the future and what is the scale of the vision? What are we ultimately trying to achieve? So notwithstanding up to the pandemic, great performance, super momentum, super impact, very, very positive results, probably only to the levels we could have really hoped for and beyond. But now, as we step into, back to hopefully the normalization of the industry and tourism itself, what is that overall future ambition? Okay, so the first thing to say is it's a lofty ambition. Okay, so it's not about just kind of incremental change. So the overall baseline figure, and I have to kind of think about this for a moment, is the pursuit of 10% share to 2026 of the value of the ROI trips on the island of Ireland. So for every pound or euro that's spent out of the 100, 10 of it's going to be spent in Northern Ireland. That moves up from that figure that I mentioned before of 7.1. So that's a 4.5 to a 7.1 up to a 10%. It's quite a significant ambition in terms of growth, but doable. But absolutely doable is what we feel. So stretch, but doable. So that's the overall piece, is to pursue that 10%, get that share up. And I guess in some ways, the truth of it is we can't really predict exactly what the numbers will look like as things normalize, but we can say we want to increase our share, our overall share. And of course, if numbers go very significant, we still want 10%. But at the moment, using the 2019 figure as the benchmark, which is probably the most robust benchmark we have, that's going to equate to generating 193 million in sterling coming from the ROI market, which brings in an additional 50 million sterling in terms of revenue from the market itself versus 2019. So again, that type of money it's seen as having hopefully a very significant and positive impact on the industry, and then obviously cascading down into communities more broadly. So that's the overall scale of ambition. Pretty clear, pretty bold, imminently measurable, but it's going to take an effort to get there, and only rightly so, to set ourselves a stretch target. So I think the thing is, if we know what we're shooting for, then the big question becomes, who are we after? Really a deep understanding of the segments of the consumer that we're pursuing and who we'll prioritize. And this was a very, very significant part of the last strategy, building that vivid picture of who the consumer was, what they needed, what they wanted, what they were motivated by, and really determining what consumers that Northern Ireland would pursue the most and really sort of attract more than others. So we've updated the segmentation. As I say, some may be familiar with the historic segmentation, but we've gone back into the market because 4 years is a long time. A lot changes, people change, behavior change, value system change. And what it resulted in is a refreshed segmentation. So we've seen very strong continuity, but we've seen evolution. And I think we had the last time there was a 8-segment solution, and that's back down to a 6-segment solution, which is good because it brings additional focus. And I'll be talking through these segments, some in more detail than others, but suffice to say there's 6 segments. Some of you are familiar with. There's the active maximizers, which is a very significant segment, which historically was there also. There's good time families, which are a new segment, a smaller segment. Open-minded explorers, which was previously there, but again, we've seen an evolution in that segment. Indulgent relaxers was previously there. Again, we've seen a strong evolution in that segment as well. Open-minded families, again, a significant segment previously there, evolved somewhat. And culture and connection seekers, again, that was a segment that was there, but it's been broadened. It was just connection seekers. We've seen an advanced or increase in their interest in culture. But we'll talk about these segments in a little bit more detail now to give you a sense of who they are, and then we'll talk about who are the priority segments. So I think the thing to say is this has been a very significant evolution here, and we'll pick out the key points in broad terms that we have to understand. The first thing to say is that there has been a dramatic growth in the number and volume of active maximizers. Okay, it's moved from 10% of the market to 33% of the market. And 2 things are going on here. If you look at the overall age profile of the ROI population, this is actually follows the age profile in terms of how it develops. So, a younger cohort has now grown into the active maximizer age and life stage. And the other thing to bear in mind is this segment now has a greater prevalence of young families. So the active maximizers, and we'll talk about their traits in a moment, have continued to be actimizers who they are, but they've grown up, they get into relationships, potentially get married, and now they have young families. Their interests, their passion points are still often similar, their value system are often similar, but their life stage has somewhat changed. But the big key thing here is that they're still present and they're of a much greater volume. The culture and connection seeker growth is also something to bear in mind. They're a much smaller segment previously, but they've moved from 4% to 20%. And they're more than they were before. They're not just the connection seekers that want to spend time with family and friends. They now have a deeper interest in cultures. So in culture, in learning, and those cultural dimensions of a short break. So that's being acknowledged in their naming as well. But that's a significant growth in that particular segment as well. The other key thing is, it was there present before, but it's really accelerated, is all segments' interest in getting interest in being the outdoors and engaging in activities. Now, some of this, I think, will be really down to the experience of lockdown, where people actually got more active. The only thing to do was to be out walking, hiking, whatever it might be. But it's also a broader macro term of society as well, generally in terms of interest in outdoors and fitness and exercise. So getting outdoors, enjoying the natural environment, engaging activities is more important than it used to be for all segments. And therefore, we need to bear that in mind in terms of how we target segments. The other thing as well is travel comfort, but really this is about the degree to which people are comfortable to travel and confident to travel. And this may be a passing dimension, but it has to be mentioned as an important dimension now. And what we've seen in the refreshed segmentation is that people are, have concerns about health and have concerns about pandemic and all those sorts of things. And for a time, older consumers are going to be more cautious about travel, and that needs to be managed. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be pursued, but again, in terms of assurances over health and safety may be more important for a period of time. It's just something we need to bear in mind. And the other thing is the other dimension that's seen as a stronger incidence of family in terms of it being a defining characteristic of the segmentation strategy overall. So family seems to be a much more significant element where people are talking about they'll travel with their families, the importance of connecting with their families, family activities. So all of those things. Now, family has always been there and present, and it was present in the last segmentation strategy, but it has just been elevated this time round. So again, that's something we really need to bear in mind. In terms of the prioritization of segments, that we talked about those kind of broad 6 segments. But really the question is, who are we going to pursue? And in terms of prioritization, the process that we've gone through is we've looked at a couple of key dimensions. The first dimension is volume. How many of them are there? Is there enough of them? So there's no point in really pursuing a very, very small number of people. It's just not going to pay the rewards that we need. The second question is value. What's their economic value and worth? How much money are they going to spend? So again, we don't necessarily want to attract large swathes of low spending consumers. It's about getting the balance right. Third consideration is what we call conversion efficiency. So how easy or difficult is it going to be, based on their current perception of Northern Ireland, to get them to Northern Ireland, to take them from interest into visitation? And of course, obviously what we're hunting for here is, to a certain degree, is the segments that are probably easier, or slightly easier to convert versus those who might be very, very difficult to convert. And the last dimension is that issue of travel comfort. Are people going to be comfortable to travel, or will that be a very significant barrier for them? So in the overall equation that we're hunting for here is a good balance where we've got a volume of particular segment that's significantly sizable enough, is of relatively good value in terms of their willingness and their overall spend, is a segment that we can convert, and also hasn't got huge hesitancy in terms of travel. And what we arrive at when we apply that lens is the first priority are active maximizers. So that's a key foundational value and volume builder within the RO market. I mean, in very simple terms, because they're 1 in 3 consumers, so it's a very big consumer base. They also represent good value. They also have good consideration, and they're not afraid to travel. So really, it ticks that particular segment ticks all of the boxes and offers a very significant opportunity for Northern Ireland into the future. The other thing is this isn't part of the prioritization process, but qualitatively we can look at the segment and look at the overall NI brand and what the destination has to offer, and have high confidence around about the correlation between this segment's needs and the overall product and experiences that Northern Ireland can offer. The second segment that emerges as a priority is the indulgent relaxers, which actually wasn't previously a priority segment. But actually, these represent the segment with the highest potential in the short term to visit Northern Ireland. And that's principally driven by their latent desire and demand to get away, to have a kind of an indulgent and relaxing break. And this seems like a very near-term win that Northern Ireland can have in terms of reaching out, making a proposition to these consumers, and really converting them. There may be some attrition with these consumers over time as they return to overseas travel, but they are a significant segment at 11%, and they have a very high conversion propensity. So as the sector gets back up and running, you've got to hunt for quick wins, and you've got to hunt for consumers that you can grab in the now and convert, and hopefully then retain and bring back. But this appears a very important segment. And the last segment as a priority is the open-minded explorers. And as I say, we'll talk about all these things in a little bit more detail, but a very high value segment that has good interest, but this is a very stable interest. So this is the type of segment that we historically targeted, but there's still gains to be had. They still have an interest in Northern Ireland. They still represent very good value in terms of what they deliver. They're a sizable segment at 15%. And I think Northern Ireland has a proven track record of actually connecting with this segment and influencing them and getting them to Northern Ireland. So that represents a long-term, very profitable and very robust segment that can be targeted, that we have a history and a past of actually winning and delivering on. So they're the 3 priority segments. I'll talk about them in a little more detail. But as I say, that magic equation we're looking for is there enough of them? Have they good economic worth? Can we get them in terms of conversion? And will they come in terms of their travel levels of travel comfort? And those are the 3 segments that emerge. Now, I think the important thing to say here is that doesn't mean that other segments are unimportant or being ignored. But what happens in the process of segmentation is, by focusing on a number of smaller segments, it focuses actions. And generally, these actions drive improvement. And of course, when you drive improvements in terms of your offer, or your communications, or your experience, or whatever it might be, that then permeates all segments. So an improvement is for everyone, not just for a particular segment. But as I say, knowing a particular segment that you're after and pursuing, and making actions, decisions, and investments in a particular segment in mind, again, allows us to focus. That allows us to really maximize our opportunity within the ROI market. So talking about the key segments in terms of winning them, on a baseline level, active maximizers, the key emphasis here is to demonstrate Northern Ireland's capacity to deliver a range of action-packed and diverse, unique experiences, and then nuancing that in an intelligent way, particularly for those who are pre-family and those who are young family within the active maximizers. For the indulgent relaxers, it's a bit harder to see the latent demand for an indulgent, high-quality pampering experience, breaks and reaching into the market in that. And within that, there's a necessity to really amplify the quality of Northern Ireland's food, shopping, and nighttime offerings. So we know what to dial up within that. And then for the open-minded explorers, it's really to focus in their desire for learning and new experiencing, and then alongside that, promoting the best of what Northern Ireland has to offer from an outdoor natural beauty, a cultural offering, and a food offering. And again, within this, there's a key requirement to really emphasise Northern Ireland's welcome and that opportunity to engage with local people and culture. That'll really resonate with this segment. So again, you might be sitting back thinking about which segment, you might go for all three, which one you're most interested in. And here's some early signposts. But I mean, I think Kate will talk about this more later on around about, okay, if this is a segment I want, or these are the segments I want, what do I do? How do I target them? What do I need to message? What experiences are they interested in? What do I really need to dial up to really resonate? This is the type of information and understanding that we're seeking to deliver and really provide industry with as a kind of to power performance, to power decisions and actions, and to ultimately to power growth. Okay, so now we're going to look at the priority segments in a little bit more detail. So the way that we're going to do this is first we're going to share a short video about each segment, and then I'll talk a little bit about them in terms of their background, their motivations, and some of the key characteristics. So the first segment that we're going to look at is the active maximizer. And so we'll take a moment to look at that video now.
We absolutely love to get away. We try to plan at least a couple of breaks throughout the year, something to look forward to, you know. We really enjoy exploring different parts of the island. There's so much to see and do right on our doorstep. Ultimately, what we're looking for is a bit of fun and adventure, getting to experience things we wouldn't normally get to at home. I suppose we love a good city break, somewhere with a bit of buzz about the place, especially when it's just the two of us on a break. So somewhere with lots of cool pubs and a vibrant food scene too. We love getting a real taste for the local food. We're quite active really, so we definitely like to get outdoors in nature and really explore the area. We love the freedom of just hopping in the car and heading off for the day and seeing the sights. It's all about embracing those epic experiences for us. We always use Google to plan ahead and have our itinerary sorted before we get there, but we're always open to changing plans. If we stumble across a hidden gem, sure, that's half the fun. The quality of accommodation is very important for us, so we always do a good search online for somewhere that's clean, comfortable, and good value for money is definitely a big plus too. We love to share what we get up to with friends and family on social media, so we're always on the lookout for those Instagrammable moments.
Okay, so following on from the video, a little bit more about the active maximizer. I think the first thing to call out is the overall size of the segment. 33% is a very, very significant portion of the market, and therefore, for obvious reasons, will be a priority segment. But some of the key characteristics that you've seen in the video, very much like to have a planned and packed itinerary, and that obviously then talks to the need for providing them with information, insight, and understanding of the varieties of things to do, see, and experience on any short break or holiday. Also, they are younger as a segment, and although we'll talk about it in a moment, some of them will be in early family, some of them are in pre-family. So they are attracted to nightlife, buzz, but also that in a kind of energetic way, but also as a couple or as a group of friends to some degree in some circumstances that are going to enjoy nightlife and buzz, but in a couple mode, a little bit more of a romantic destination as well. In terms of their behaviour, kind of going back to the point around about having a packed itinerary, they will look for a great destination and plan around that. And for this segment, the trick is really to have those couple of big hooks that will, grab their attention, grab their interest, but then critically, as they start to explore what else can be done to build around that with other adjacent experiences, whether it be food or cultural or nightlife, whatever it might be. So it is about those big hooks, but it's then about building around that sense that there's much, much more here, much more to experience, much more to find. One of the key things being alluded to, there is an emerging trend within this particular segment, and they are going into or are in early family stage. So that's a consideration. They will be still traveling independent of children, but some of them will also have children. I think the key thing here is that the things that they want to do and the experiences that they want to have don't necessarily have changed all that much. So they still want busy days, they still want a variety of experiences. And of course, they may be somewhat influenced by the fact they have children with them, but just because Sometimes a child doesn't mean that they want to have a great food experience, a great outdoor experience, a great cultural experience. So it's something worth bearing in mind for this particular segment. They're also still highly interested with energetic experiences and unpredictability. So they are looking for action, they are looking for energy, and they're looking for fine things, serendipity, exploration and discovery very much motivated them. And because of their profile and who they are and their particular generation, they are very focused on social media. They like to share things online, but equally and perhaps even more importantly, what they like to do is they do a lot of research and information online. So the positioning of Northern Ireland as a destination in terms of social media, in terms of digital, is particularly important for this segment. So that's an overview of the Active Maximizer, our largest segment and one of our key priority segments now and into the future. So the next segment we're going to look at is the indulgent relaxers. So before I talk to you about the indulgent relaxer in a little bit more detail, let's look at a short video that gives you a sense of who they are, what they're interested in, and what they're motivated by.
So we love to get away at least a couple of times a year. We both lead very busy lives and have 2 older kids at home, so it's always great to just head off for the weekend, just the 2 of us, and leave the world behind. For us, it's really about getting to spend quality time with each other. When we're away, we really want to treat ourselves and make the most of our break, so we don't mind spending that bit extra in a top-notch hotel or a fancy dinner and a nice bottle of wine. Nothing relaxes our minds quite like being outdoors in nature. A nice relaxing stroll through picturesque woodland, or maybe a little bit of horse riding along a beautiful beach. It's the kind of thing that we'd be after. We're always looking for ways to awaken our sense of adventure when we're away. We often like to get a bit of shopping in wherever we go and love to try new food and local restaurants too. So ideally, it's somewhere that's got a lot going on. We might spend the afternoon browsing through the local markets and boutique stores, and then we might top the day off with a tasty meal and a glass of red in the Gastro pub for the evening. When it comes to hotels, we definitely look for luxury, something a bit special, you know. We do enjoy good pampering too, so if there's a spa at the hotel, that would definitely pique our interest.
Okay, so hopefully that video has given you a sense and an insight into the indulgent relaxer. May feel familiar to you, maybe some interesting new things in there. But let's unpack that particular segment in a little bit more detail. So one of the big things here to really note here is that they really are motivated by the opportunity to spend quality time with their partner, with a family member, with friends, and short breaks. So it is about connection. It is about connection and being with that person or those persons on a particular break. How that is characterized is particularly interesting. So there's many ways you can spend time with people, but this particular segment is characterized by when they spend it, they want to do that good, indulgent quality time. So when they're away, they want to do nice things. They want to treat themselves. They want to have those somewhat luxurious or very enjoyable, comforting experiences. And the other thing here is that, you know, not surprisingly, if you start to build up this picture, this segment of all segments, not just priority segments, but of all segments, is most likely to take a romantic break as their next break. So that's what their want is, that's what their demand is, that's what their need is, that's what their core motivation is. So this starts to really make sense around spending quality time together, indulging, and have a romantic break. But like all breaks, there are other dimensions attached to it, and this makes sense as well in terms of their motivation and interest in shopping opportunities while on a short break. And that could be in urban settings, but also can be in other settings as well. So they want to indulge themselves, and sometimes indulgence is buying things for themselves, nice things for themselves, while they're away. So shopping is a big draw within there as well. Attached to that idea of being comfortable and indulging and having some luxury, they like to stay in large, comfortable hotels with all the amenities, all the services, and all the creature comforts that come with that. So that's really what they're looking for. And of course, the centerpiece within this revolves around the indulgence, but also that quality time is the ability to really enjoy good food and maybe have the experience enlivened somewhat by music as well. So that sense of entertainment and sense of really good food. So you can start to build a relatively vivid picture of the type of breaks that this particular segment wants to enjoy and how these different elements and different motivations and characteristics come together for them in terms of overall what they're looking for, what they're hunting for. So that's the indulgent relaxer. So we'll now move on to the final priority segment, which is the open-minded explorers, which again, some people may be familiar with as an existing segment. So let's take a moment to look at a short video that gives some sense of who they are, what they like to do, and the things that they like to enjoy on their breaks.
There's
there's nothing quite like heading off on a nice relaxing break and escaping the weekly routine. Our kids are all grown up now, so it's usually just the two of us. We typically look for accommodation that's spacious, comfortable, and really high standards. But at the same time, value for money is definitely something we consider. And we always appreciate a warm welcome too. We like something with a bit of culture, you know, music, art, history, that sort of thing. And we really like to get to know the place in a genuine way. So we might spend the day exploring interesting galleries or museums. And then we might head to an evening theatre show after a nice meal or whatever. We always enjoy chatting with the locals too. You get a real sense of the place. And we love getting out into nature and feeling the sun and the wind on our faces. We're all about embracing outdoor experiences that really make us feel alive. Oh, and we're massive foodies. So we usually look for somewhere that's got plenty of food and drink experiences for us to sink our teeth into. We love nothing more than sitting down after a day well spent with some good food and a couple of glasses of red. And we always do a fair bit of Googling before we book anything though. We really want to make sure wherever we go is the right fit for us.
Okay, so looking at the open-minded explorer, what's very interesting, well, I suppose the first thing is to note the scale. There's a significant segment of 15%. And some of the things that really start to emerge around this. This segment in particular is very interested in learning and interaction and meeting people and having new experiences. I think they have a strong sense of seeking to better themselves, seeking to learn more, have more experiences, as I say. And there's a couple of critical things that you'll see within this. So that open-mindedness, that willingness to explore, one of the key things is the linchpin of food. You know, really enjoying good food. It's highly, highly motivating for them. So when they take a trip or take a break, that has to be characterized by good food experiences. A good break is not a good break unless there is enjoyable food, great service in good environments. So that's really, really important here. That is then coupled up with this desire to engage in culture and seek unique experiences, to broaden the mind, to try new things, to experience new things, to learn new things, is very, very motivating for them as well. But they are holistic about how they think that. Some of that unique experiences and some of that learning is for them attached to the natural environment and scenic attractions. So again, it's about exploring for them, seeing new places, new environments, new flora, new fauna, new landscapes. And really they take a lot of satisfaction, a lot of joy at the natural environment and the scenic attractions in terms of thinking about how they enjoy short breaks and holidays. One of the things to note here, and it may be a somewhat transient dimension, but it is important, certainly into the near future, is that they're a slightly older segment. As a consequence of that, they have a higher tendency to be concerned about their personal safety and health. So they need reassurances about the welcome. They need reassurances around about public health measures, particularly in the time of COVID. So really for them, what really can seal the deal is when they go somewhere that they have this very strong sense of hospitality, a very strong welcome, a very strong greeting. And that is with who will interact with on the basis of staff that will interact with, but also people who deliver experiences and just people in general, whether it be local community or whatever it might be. Also, possibly because of their life stage, but also because of who they are, they don't want to stay somewhere that isn't comfortable. So they do pursue high quality accommodation. So really they want the full package in terms of great food, culture, experiences, beautiful environment. But they do need to rest at the end of the day. They do want to go back to somewhere nice and comfortable and of a high quality. That's a really important dimension of their experience. However, they're screwed enough. They will spend money, but they have a very strong sense of value for money. So what their money is worth and what they should get in terms of what they're paying. So they will pay attention to value for money. That's not to say, as I say, they're willing to spend money in the good disposable income, but it's really about that equation between how much am I spending, what am I getting, what's the experience like, what is the quality like. So again, this is the open-minded explorer, a very strong and high potential segment into the long term, and that's an overview of who they are. Okay, so the next thing to talk about is, if we're really clear about the scale of ambition that we have, if we're very clear about who are the priority segments and what motivates them and what their passion points are, what's the strategy for growth? What do we actually need to do? There are lots of legitimate decisions and actions that can be taken. But the question is, what ones are most focused? What ones will pay greatest dividends? So we spent quite a bit of time deliberating this, particularly with the steering group that ran the project, who was made up of industry peers, and deliberating over, what is it that the steps that we need to take. And ultimately, it was concluded that we've got to keep very strong focus here. And ultimately, it has to be 3 platforms. There are 3 platforms that are going to drive growth here. And we'll talk about each of these separately in some detail. But at summary level, the first one is collective effort. So really, to win in the ROI market, it's about engaging industry and empowering them to know and understand the ROI market, and motivating them to compete and win it, and also supporting industry collaboration and development as well. So there's a good offer, if not a very good offer out there already, but how do we enhance it even further? How can you increase overall industry development and collaboration across various actors to really become, a really unstoppable team with respect to the ROI market, and build that momentum in which kind of all industry benefits. The other piece, the second dimension, is compelling communication. So again, this will come as no surprise. We need to continue to communicate. We need to build knowledge. We need to build relevance, and we need to be compelling. We need to be differentiated. We need to have standout. So it's going to be critical into the future, and it will always be the case that we have powerful messaging that resonates with the ROI market, and also is very much locked into the priority segments, passion points. And the third dimension is about constant purchasability. So if we do all this good work in terms of experience design and delivery and great communications, all the things that are really, really positive, there has to be a very dedicated effort to make products, to make experiences, to make hotels, to make restaurants imminently bookable, and make it really easy to convert, give opportunities, loads of opportunities for the ROI consumer, not just to consider, but to buy, and enhance our presence in all of the platforms in which sales can be made, and really give as many opportunity or purchase points as possible for the ROI consumer. We'll talk a little bit about the how shortly. Okay, so looking at those in a little bit more detail in terms of collective effort. So the key objective here is developing and supporting a motivated, engaged, connected, and committed industry that's focused and equipped to win in the ROI market. So again, the first thing is to really engage industry about that, and engage industry on a sustained basis. And of course, this webinar itself is part of that, engaging industry and bringing further information and insight to industry about the ROI market, the opportunity that it presents, and the things that can done and should be done in order to deliver on that. So again, it's about really engaging and creating a sustained engagement with industry, bringing information and new information as well, in order to build focus on the ROI market. The other thing is to be always developing and enhancing consumer segment understanding. So we have a very deep understanding now, but things probably will change and evolve. So there's a commitment within the strategy to continue to be very strongly consumer-centric and segment-centric, and build additional insight and understanding all along the way. And that's also about, when we execute the market, learning about what works and what resonates with segments, and continue to build that. Because I think the one thing to say, with high confidence is, if we remain ruthlessly customer-centric, then the strategy will work, because the consumer is number one within this. The third dimension is about prioritizing hospitality as a key industry development focus, and this is hugely important here. Notwithstanding the investment in product and experience more broadly, there is a very strong need to ensure that the hospitality and the welcome that Northern Ireland delivers to the ROI consumers is the best that it can be. Because one of the things we look across all segments, not just priority segments, that idea of being welcome, being greeted, feeling a really positive atmosphere, and that your customer is really valued, and people are delighted that the consumer is there, and ROI consumers in the ROI market, has a very significant impact. And actually, when we look at Northern Ireland when it's at its very best, when we look at people who have been and say it exceeded their expectations, the big dimension it comes down to is people in hospitality and welcome. So again, it's about really, that's a natural thing that will come, but also putting in the kind of effort to say, how can we really improve it? How can we empower our people to build up our hospitality profile and really deliver that to consumer? The last dimension is about understanding that we always will exist in a competitive context, and there is a necessity to really think about the ROI market in particular, and competitors in the ROI market, and say, where are the areas we need to achieve parity? Are we as good as we need to be as an industry offering? Where can we push for superiority? What can we do better so we are superior to the ROI offering or other offerings? And what makes us different? So, what is it that is unique about our offering that makes it special? And really thinking about that, those things simultaneously, the things we need to dial up and become maybe better at to achieve parity, the things we can push on and drive superiority, and the things that will really make us position us in a way that's unique and differentiated and ultimately compelling. The next area of compelling communications. This is the objective here is to deliver consistent, connected, and motivating communications that builds knowledge of what Northern Ireland has to offer and a clear and compelling reasons to go. So again, it's that critical thing of more and more knowledge. We can't provide enough knowledge, but also making sure that almost the hero elements in that knowledge is compelling reasons to go. So I know more, but when giving more information, you give me more and more reasons to go, and now it's a no-brainer going to go. And within this, there's a couple of key strands. It's about the continued development of the Embrace a Giant Spirit brand, experience brand, and really pushing that. As I say, that's early days in its infancy, but it's starting to have traction and really building out on that platform as a kind of master kind of platform for communications. It's about understanding that there is a need for tactical communications as well. So really kind of be very insightful at times around about practical and tactical steps that can be taken to resonate with the ROI consumer. And that can be anything really from certainly again how quickly you can get here, or also potentially asserting the value for money proposition. These things that we know are immediate triggers that we can really build out on a tactical basis. It is also about the appropriate investment. So communications, they do need to have the checkbook behind them. We do need to buy the media space. We do need to invest in good production. We do need to find our way into the digital channels, and all of that does come with an investment profile. So it's really about for TNI and other parties to really think about how we really ensure that we spend enough to deliver in the ROI market. And then it's also about highlighting major and unique attractions. So some of the things that Northern Ireland we think is famous for may not be as famous for as we might think, and there is still a significant way to go in terms of promoting and delivering clarity around about those big hitting attractions, those unique experiences that Northern Ireland has to offer, and messaging that into the ROI market, because it has worked historically, but there's still a very significant swathe of consumers that we have yet to influence, and we can really play to our strengths in order to do that. And the last dimension that within this particular area of strategy is joined up communications and messaging. And this is the challenging one, it's a difficult one. This is really about anybody's communicating is to be on brand, to really have joined up communications from industry as a whole, through TNI, through industry partners, through communities, through experience owners, through hoteliers, through restaurateurs. And of course, we don't want a big blob of homogenous communications, but we do want Northern Ireland to appear as one very coherent destination into the ROI market. And therefore, efforts need to be made in terms of really understanding how to have joined up communications and messaging across all stakeholders into the ROI market. So we build that vivid picture that is compelling and motivating. And the last critical area is about what we've called constant purchasability. And this is about the objective here is about creating the conditions through which compelling connected short propositions are easily accessed and easily purchasable. So putting the product and propositions out there and making sure that they can be purchased really easy by the consumer. There's no barriers. And within this, there's three key strands. It's about really building and delivering multi-dimensional segment-led holiday propositions. So not just one thing, a number of things that really says to the segments, priority segment we're choosing, this is the perfect place for you to come, and I'm going to help you to imagine the great experience that you can have, and I'm going to give you great evidence around about the great place you can stay, eat, the things that you can do. But again, it's about being customer-centric, a number of dimensions coming together to really say this is a brilliant destination for you to come and make it irresistible. The other critical thing in very practical terms is optimization of key sales platforms, particularly in OTAs or any other digital interface, to really make sure and understand, is product easily available? But critically as well, is it positioned the way we want it to? Is it really going to give a sense of brand and destination? So what can we do in selling channels to simultaneously sell, but also position Northern Ireland as a destination and do that really, really well? So again, optimization to really make sure we're on the right shelves, imminently purchasable, easily purchasable. And then the other dimension as well associated is leveraging events as a key driver and reasons to go. So we know events, festivals, and otherwise are a key means in which we can actually deliver on consumers' passion points. So it becomes about what they're interested in and motivated by than necessarily the destination. And as things return to normality, there's going to be more and more events, and therefore about understanding what type of events are going to most resonate with the segments we want the most, and how do we dial them up. And these sometimes they can be blockbuster events, but also they can be the very small events, the niche interests, the more regional interests, all these sort of things as well. But key events we know historically and into the future are going to be a driver as a reason to go, because they center in, as I say, on a consumer passion point or consumer passion points, and really galvanize them to go. But the bit here is that we've got to ensure in doing that, it's that they don't just come for the event. Then they say, what else can I do? Where can I stay? Where can I eat? What other experience can I have? and therefore we really deliver a holistic experience that may be brought in by an event, but so much more happens when an ROI consumer decides to go and visit Northern Ireland, with the initial reason being an event, building on from that. Okay, so there are the three areas. There's a number of foundations as well. So foundations, I'll spend a moment on these. I think there's a couple of key things. One critical one I've mentioned already is that requirement to stay segment-centric and have a segment-centric ethos, and stay very customer-focused. That always needs to be there. Effective strategy management. So, this is a strategy to be rolled out. It has to be managed. It can't just be kind of socialized, whether it be today or a strategy document. It has to be managed and implemented. And it may well need to be adjusted and evolved over time. Some things may work great, some things may need to be tweaked. The market conditions may change, consumer dynamics might flex slightly, and we need to understand that. And that locks at this next point around about having actionable market intelligence. So we need to stay close to the customer, and it can't just be we'll do a piece of work that'll set the strategy for 4, 5, 6 years, and then we'll just assume that the consumer is going to be the same for the next 5 years. It's about continuing understanding and engaging with the consumer and having real insight, but insights that we know, but also insight as a basis for competitive advantage. So that really means insight that we know the consumer better than anybody else, and therefore we can respond to their needs. And also, it's important to say it's not a table stake, but it is hugely important, is the ongoing development of sustainability credentials. So all consumers, some to greater degrees and some to lesser degrees, are really focusing in on environmental impact, sustainability credentials. And we know there's lots of work going on already at an industry and sector level. But again, it's about how do we accelerate that work? How do we stand it up? Hopefully in time is not just a kind of stable stake, but also a virtue, an area in which we really make strong progress because it has resonance with consumers. And it also implies there's connectivity between sustainability credentials and quality credentials. So the consumer, we know from qualitative research, will say to us that if a destination or even a hotel's sustainability credentials are good, then I would assume that the experience, the accommodation, and the food is also good. So having strong sustainability credentials pays a dividend in a number of ways to the consumer, and that is a foundational element of the overall strategy. The last thing we need to look at is obviously how we measure success. So we've taken a good and hopefully an interesting look at what ultimately we're trying to achieve in terms of our scale of ambition, segments that we're going to pursue, and the strategy we're going to deploy. But the question is, how do we measure it? If we don't measure it, then we can't understand the overall impact that we have. So measurement is going to be done in 3 particular ways. There's going to be a hard commercial metric, as you'd imagine, that's kind of very clear and very transparent. There's going to be measurements around about brand and the overall impact of brand on the customer, and then there's going to be measurements implemented around about industry in terms of industry's development, in terms of delivery of product and experience, and overall itineraries. So the first one to talk about is the hard commercial metric, and we mentioned earlier the overall target here is to win 10% share, value share of ROI trips on the island of Ireland, moving it up from the 2019 figure of 7.1% up to 10%. So again, it's a stretch target, it's ambitious, but ultimately we do want to say to ourselves is that assuming that the island of Ireland market on a total level grows, we want to increase our slice of pie within that. We want the 10%, and we want the revenue that will fall out from that. Now, based on 2019 figures, that'll deliver some circa 193 million sterling, an uplift of 50 odd million. It may be more, but again, that's a hard metric. It's undeniable. We measure over time that we're seeking to deliver. The second thing is to say what's happening with brand and the customer. Okay, the key thing here is that we have seen early signs that the Embrace a Giant Experience brand has traction, and it is a means in which we can build up, a key platform to really project Northern Ireland as a destination. However, it's in its infancy. I think the last figures would state that awareness of it is about 17%, and we want over time to really dial it up aggressively up to about 60%. And I think the thing here is that what ultimately we want is 6 out of 10 or 2 in 3 ROI consumers, when they're asked, have they heard of Embrace a Giant Experience brand, say, yes, I have heard of it. And hopefully, the assumption is that attached to that is going to be positive associations. So it'll become a vector through which people have built up knowledge and relevance of Northern Ireland as a destination. So really focusing that and building that out. And the impact that'll be to drive the overall funnel in terms of intention. So what will happen here is that we're aiming to have 70% of Irish consumers to sort of say, yeah, when you ask me, I do plan to take a break in Northern Ireland within the next 3 years. That's moving it up from a current figure of 54%. So again, good growth within that. And this will drive the funnel, because obviously the more people who have the intent, the more we can drive conversion. And if we can actually really deliver in terms of compelling communications and deliver the experiences that we want to deliver, then that will really hopefully transition that 70% in terms of intention into high conversion levels, which will really drive business performance and ultimately pursuit of the commercial target. The last area is really metrics around about industry focus and collaboration. So the strategy really will only be a success, or will be a success to the degree to which industry can become very focused on and deliver on it. And what we're saying here is that there's going to be a measurement as a result how it'll actually be achieved, but they're working on associated with that to really say, what is the connectivity between our experience brand in the shape of Embrace the Giant Spirit and the products and experiences and the itineraries that we've developed. So again, if we're developing Embrace the Giant Spirit as a key kind of vector to which we're promoting Northern Ireland as a destination, is that we've got to make sure that the product and experience and itineraries are really fueling that. But also, in a reciprocal kind of way, if there are products and experiences being developed, positioned, or enhanced, and itineraries being put together, is that Embrace the Giant Spirit is the perfect vehicle in which these can be communicated, socialized, and ultimately then influence the consumer in terms of conversion. The other piece here, the last piece on an industry basis from a metric point of view, is to take a measure on the degree to which there's an increase in the development and delivery of local connected itineraries and cross-selling. So this is really about that joined-up approach, where we've got, whether it be a hotelier or a restaurateur or experience owner, someone who's managing, delivering a festival, saying, I'm not just going to do this on my own, we're going to do it together. And by doing it together in terms of building connected itineraries and having complementary cross-selling, we can deliver that really holistic, full proposition to the segments we want the most, where they say, wow, there's everything they want there. There's the food, there's the accommodation, there's the experiences, there's the people, there's the activities, all those things come together. And that really has to happen through very good industry collaboration and a very positive joined-up approach. And again, it's that question of, if we can measure this and see improvements, then we can really hopefully accelerate those improvements, because that cross-selling, that joined-up approach, we have high confidence will have the desired impact in the overall oil market. And of course, all of these things ultimately do ladder up into that commercial metric of really achieving that. So I'm going to conclude here. I think there will be questions coming in a digital format, and they will be addressed in due course. I think the other thing to say is that, I haven't mentioned already, is obviously there's the full strategy document, which is a much longer overview and much more detailed overview of the background to the strategy, of the segments, of the strategy that we're actually implementing, gives you more information in terms of the overall metrics being applied. So all that's available as well. You can read yourself into that. And as I say, the questions will be dealt with in due course. I hope before I hand it over to Kate, I hope you found this piece interesting, informative, and ultimately useful. I wish you every success with respect to the ROI mark into the future. Thank you.